new things and some migration work to do. But first, I'm just going to deputize everybody because we need a quorum. So welcome everybody officially to the policy committee. And can we get a motion to approve the minutes from January?
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion from Ms. Johnson-Hostler, a second from Dr. Ng. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? All right. And we're going to kick this off with Ms. Johnson-Hostler's and my near favorite policy, not as good as the mail policy, but drones. Yes. So, Mr. Bell, Ms. Philbrook?
So we're bringing this to you today as a revision.
Yes.
And I'm going to turn it over to Cecil and Trish Philbrook. If you don't know Trish Philbrook, I'll turn it over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Just a little bit of background here. The drone policy was created in 1919. I was like, we had drones back then, they probably had feathers on them. So, 2019, and technology, the year in technology is, you can make a lot of leaps and bounds in that amount of time. So we did identify an area in the drone policy where we felt like it was, it needed clarification. There was a little bit of a restriction there that we felt like was standing in the way of some educational opportunity. So Trish Philbrook, since she joined Risk Management, has been in charge of she's been our point person for drone requests, whether they be by commercial use or by schools or programs. Excuse me. So she was very instrumental in looking into the issues that we were having, and I'm going to turn it over to her so she can give you a little more background about what we want to modify.
Thank you, Cecil. Good afternoon, Chair Mahaffey and Vice Chair Johnson-Hostler and other members of the Policy Committee. We're delighted to be here today. I may repeat a little bit of what Cecil just shared with you. The drone policy was created in 2019, so almost 4.5 years ago. And after the policy was written, we created a process for the request and approval of drone usage. And this is run very smoothly. By following the policy and process for approval, schools have been able to request the use of drones for educational purposes, and we have had many schools reach out to Risk Management. Commercial drone use is also permitted by board policy. We work with facilities design and construction to approve those requests. At this time, we do not recommend any revisions in the commercial area as this process is working beautifully. Currently, we have several schools who've incorporated drone usage into their curriculum and have worked with our office to provide the necessary information needed for approval. However, since 2019, drone technology has only increased and has now become a complementary tool for STEM education, and we see increasing requests for drone use. To this end, we've worked with staff to collaborate on a streamlined internal request and approval process for these specific requests when drones are heavily used and have many flights that are requested within the coursework. Some of those departments are our CTE department and our JROTC department. Although board policy allows for the use of educational purposes, recently it's come to our attention that the policy is a bit too restrictive in certain areas. Our intention by making these minor revisions is to make those requests possible. I'd be happy to note the revisions of the policy that we recommended. The first revision may be on page 2 of the drone policy under the letter D, use of drones for educational purposes. As you can see, we've deleted the reference to compliance with technological standards as the district already reviews all technology requests. And the second minor revision is the last sentence of the same area D, use of drones for educational purposes, and we have deleted the reference of who may be providing a demonstration and added that it may also be during the school day. Demonstrations may be approved by following the guidelines in section E. That pretty much sums up our revisions, and I'd be happy to provide any clarification for our policy revisions.
I do want to add one thing. Under Section D, where we struck the comply with technological standards available at, there was a blank in there because technology was going to have a link to them to essentially vet the type of drones that we would be using. That never occurred because, again, technology moves so quickly, and risk management also took on the responsibility of when a school purchased drones we keep a list of those drones that we have. So that's the reason for that change, which it is minor, but it was just, we didn't feel the need for it anymore since we could take care of that.
Questions? What kind of reach out did you do to like the JROTC or the CTE programs? I can think of one, and I'm sure there are more, where students actually can get their license in operating the drone. And is this based on the feedback you received from those teachers, or?
We worked with both departments, and so we worked with Joanne Honeycutt in CTE, I believe Chad Holloman, in order to streamline the process, because the way our procedures are written, it's really for an individual teacher who wants to incorporate drones into their curriculum and have a drone flight.
Okay.
But CTE is now offering an entire course called Drone 1, Drone 2. They'll have mini flights, so we've streamlined it. It's the same thing for JROTC, if their curriculum provides that.
So are they having then to reach out to you all per course or per
Per
day?
semester,
Okay.
per semester for each of those. Yeah, and that's been going really well.
Mr. Hershey?
Just curious where the standards came from when this was enacted. Operators shall not fly the drone more than 100 miles per hour, because I don't know what a high limit is for a drone, but it's 100 miles per hour. I heard it's very fast. And just kind of the weight of the drone as well. 55 pounds seems heavy for what we might use.
Yeah, well, as you can tell, since there's no markup in that was included in the original drone policy that we worked out with Darrington Smith.
Okay.
At the time that we were developing the policy, we worked with risk management, FD&C, and real estate services, and we also conferred with DMV. Actually, at the time, was kind of in control of the drone guidelines for the state of North Carolina.
Yeah.
So all of that information came from that initial building of that policy.
Okay. And they haven't updated that? Okay.
There have been some updates for licensing and I think flight plans. Obviously, FFA doesn't want us flying near airports or in the path, whether they be commercial or even private. But there have been some slight tweaks in that, but nothing that we felt like affected policy.
Yeah. Thank you.
I can add briefly, I think these are both statutory. The 55-pound limit, I did just look that up, that's the weight limit for the FAA regulations on drones, essentially.
Okay.
So that's kind of your definition of a drone. It has to be under that weight. And the miles per hour limit, I think, is also statutory or regulatory. No, actually, it looks like that is, that's the school board model language. They have a footnote in their model policy that says you can substitute a different mile per hour limit. So that is not a legal requirement.
And I'll just say, Chairman Haffey, if you remember, I guess the three of us were around when we first developed the policy. And for Mr. Hershey's benefit, we reviewed municipal policies, parks policies, other school policies. There was a lot of ingredients that went into that.
Community
final
feedback,
proof.
too.
Yeah,
we did.
that's right. Somebody's spouse was a drone, on the board was a drone pilot, I think. All right.
Yeah. All right. Anything else? All right, is there a motion to send this to first reading?
So moved.
Second. All right. Motion from Mr. Haggerty, second from Ms. Caulfield. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? All right, thank you all very much. We'll move on to quite a few policies regarding personnel. So we'll allow for a quick change of folks at the other end of the table.
While we're transitioning out, just a reminder that we are in the 7,000 series of our migration project, and 7,000 series are titled personnel. So these will be our frequent flyers for quite some time as we move through our substantial list of HR policies. So
Kick us off, Dr. Crane?
I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to turn it over to
Perfect.
Ms. Hill and Dr. Machillo and Ms. Potofsky.
Ms. Hill, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So we have brought you several policies today. Some will be pretty simple, and I don't think that where we have very minor modifications, and then others include more details. So we're bringing you 6 personnel policies. 2 of those policies involve work environment issues, and the other 4 deal with workday and absences. As you know, we're continuing to work through our personnel policies as part of our migration process. And so we will be seeing you guys a lot over the next few months or so. We will start with policy 7240, if that's okay. That is our drug-free and alcohol-free workplace policy. This is a new policy that is based on the recommendation from the School Boards Association. In adopting this policy, we would replace policy 2307/3007/4007, which is our current drug-free workplace environment policy that's in the old manual. In general, we have followed the guidelines provided by the School Boards Association, and then we have added some language here and there where we're incorporating information from our existing policy. So, for example, you will see in Section A, we specifically added a sentence related to transmitting of drug paraphernalia as something that was reflected in our current policy but not specifically reflected here. We also added information about exuding the odor of alcohol beverages or drugs, another issue from our current policy that we want to bring over. Section B, we expanded this section of the School Boards Association policy to reflect our current information regarding use of prescription medication and when that use might impact in the workplace, and our process that we have for addressing those matters with employees. In our applicability section, this is the section that talks about where this policy is applicable. We did modify to add in a section where it indicates that the policy doesn't apply when to an employee's consumption of alcoholic beverages at a reception or similar function. And we added in that that would be a function that's not on school grounds and where students would not be present. We also reminded employees that no matter what's going on, they still are covered by our policy 7300, staff responsibility and code of ethics. Then the reasonable search provision in proposed section D, we added language in here again from our current policy that talks about if an independent contractor or volunteer refuses a screening test, that they could be removed from other duties in the district. In section E, duty to report, again, this is consistent with our current policy, adding information about our responsibility as employees to report if we have reason to believe that another employee is under the influence or in possession of drug or alcohol or other items here. Section F deals with an employee assistance, basically indicating that we support employees who are seeking help for drug or alcohol problems before those problems have to be addressed in the workplace. And we have in place our employee assistance program, as well as, which is our external vendor, as well as our internal employee support and wellness program. So that's a quick overview of this policy and some of the modifications there. If there are any questions, I certainly will respond.
Ms. Caulfield?
I love this new setup with the annotation on the side. It's actually really easy to read, so I do appreciate that. And I don't know if this is a separate policy. I know you're migrating everything. This is drug and alcohol, so I guess that I understand the substance abuse. But do we have anything that would tie in vaping into this, or is that a separate? I mean, we're trying to be a good model for our students, and we're asking them not to vape or smoke on grounds. Do we have a policy for staff as well?
I don't,
I guess the question is, does our tobacco and nicotine products,
yes, our tobacco and
Covered.
nicotine does include vaping. I can't remember off the top of my head the exact language, but it is in there for vaping products, to my recollection.
So it's a separate policy?
It
This
is.
is just substance?
Mhm.
maybe a cross-reference to that in the first paragraph for tobacco or nicotine-related products, please see policy.
Absolutely. No, I'm listening.
Dr. Ng?
Just remind me, there is policy regarding ability for employees to inform without having any kind of liability to that. Yeah, you know what I'm talking
Oh,
about?
I know what you're talking about.
Whistleblower?
Yeah, it's sort of like a whistleblower.
Whistleblower, yeah.
Yeah.
Are you, if I can just be clear, are you talking about an employee indicating that another employee may be under the influence of
Right.
something?
Right.
So we, specifically, when we deal with people for whom we've received reports of concerns, we make it clear in employee relations, when we're talking and dealing with that potential misconduct, that people are not to retaliate against anyone who might be a witness or a reporter or even an accuser in matters that we are dealing with. I can't recall off the top of my head if we have a specific whistleblower type policy, but I know that we have retaliation it's a specific provision in some of our policies about retaliation, like our 1710 policy. But I can tell you, at least from our standpoint, that we instruct employees that that they are not to retaliate against someone in those circumstances. And if we determine that there was retaliation, then that would be something that we would be addressing with employees as well.
And you do have a general prohibition against retaliation policy 1760, which it applies to employees, but really even more broadly, I think, and would prohibit any form of retaliation against anyone who in good faith makes or intends to make a report, a practice, policy, act, or omission of the board, any employee of the board, or anyone with whom the board has a business relationship violates a law, policy, or regulation.
Thank you.
So that'll be one we get to as we
Yeah,
continue.
that'll be on the list.
I do want to ask just a simple question around the employee assistance piece. Just when this approach here, is it a welcoming process for people to voluntarily share that they're seeking out help to take away any stigmas? Because it's very important. You can have some very quality staff that are very good at their jobs. They just have these challenges. So I was just wondering around this, are we creating an environment that's welcoming for people to actually utilize this without the stigma attached to it, to know that it's welcoming, that they're not necessarily being micromanaged around the fact that it's known that they're receiving support to superiors in any way?
So I'll give just a little background on our employee assistance program, which is, there is a policy that we haven't brought to you today that references our employee assistance program. That program is an external program that we provide for employees. It's a benefit to all of our employees that we provide, and they are able to seek confidential support through the employee assistance program externally. Their supervisors would not know unless the employee shared that there was information with regard to them working through that program. There are times that we may require an employee to use that program if needed, for learning some skills and things like that, because it goes beyond just like substance abuse support or those sorts of things. There's a wide variety of supports and resources that that program offers. In addition to that, we do have our internal employee support and wellness program, where we have our employees within the employee relations section who provide support to employees who may be in crisis, who may need some assistance, who may be in need, and they help provide and put that employee in touch with different sorts of resources. And they are able to speak to those employees, and they keep that information confidential in terms of if an employee reaches out and says, I need some support with this particular. And they are wonderful clinicians who support our staff members in the employee support and wellness program. So I believe that there are several programs available for our employees to help them in those areas if that need is there.
Thank you.
But that was a very good question. What seems like one of the biggest barriers we have to participation in these programs is doubt or questioning about confidentiality and just the perceived stigma that is attached to it. So I appreciate that explanation.
Absolutely.
I was curious, under E, duty to report, in the second paragraph, it talks about if the employee has an arrest charge or conviction, they have to notify their supervisor and the assistant superintendent of human resources. And I like that it's a two-pronged, you have to let two different people know. My question is, and this is, I hope that this doesn't happen, but what if it is the supervisor that the employee has to report as having suspicious behavior? Is that just you go up to the next level, or is that?
Yeah, so if an employee had concern about their supervisor, perhaps, yes, so they could report directly to us. And so this is two different things, right? So this is about actually arrests or charges if
Right.
someone has been criminally charged, where they notify their supervisor, hey, I received this criminal charge, and they also notify the assistant superintendent, but we're his designee for those purposes. So normally the supervisor or the employee will call employee relations to let us know that. Separate from that, which really is the first paragraph that
Right.
talks about reporting there. And in that circumstance, if someone is concerned that their supervisor is the person, they can report to that person's supervisor, or they can reach out directly to employee relations.
Okay, can we just put that, or can reach out to the employee relations in there? Mr. Haggerty?
I remember when the policy was originally brought over, and I'm just going to, I know it's not going to stop or change anything, but I'm going to bring up my continued objection that I think the policy is illegal under North Carolina law. I know that Mr. Blumberg disagreed with me when we first heard this, but I believe that North Carolina has a law that any discrimination against any employee for possession or use of a substance whose possession, ownership, and use is legal is prohibited. And again, I know that council has advised that they have an alternate interpretation of it, but this was something that was developed under North Carolina state law to protect users of tobacco products from discrimination against them, and it remains on our books in terms of taking disciplinary action against employees, firing employees for use of something that's legal. And now, as our laws change about different substances that are available to people, someone could be coming here from out of state that might have a prescription for the use of one of these products. They might have a treatment that uses some of the ingredients in these products in legal amounts to treat muscle pain or inflammation, glaucoma, many of these things. If it's not illegal for them to have it, if it's not illegal for them to use it, I believe it's illegal for us to create a prohibition that could lead to disciplinary sanction or loss of employment. And I put that out there, so.
So I was not a part of the original discussion that may have had with regard to that. I would say that to the extent that we are addressing people for use of a product, whether legal or illegal. It is that use that impacts the workplace that we are addressing. So, for example, we have in here about proper use of prescription medications, and there is no problem with people properly using prescription medication. But when they use those prescription medications and it impacts the workplace, so for example, they are, incoherent, or there are negative side effects or negative things that occur because of their use of something, illegal or legal, that's where we are stepping in to address some of those issues. Most of the things laid out in here are specific to drugs and those sorts of things. I think the only thing that might be a little different with what you're addressing would be tobacco or alcohol, something that may be legal in some, that may be illegal for some, but where we put some restrictions on the possession of those things or the use of those things in the work environment. I will certainly let Neil jump in with regard to any specifics on that.
I need to play catch up on the issue and happy to look into it and to check with Jonathan, so I don't have the background on this one.
And I don't want to hold anything up or, push it from moving forward. Just for background, I think Mr. Blumberg's point was that he was saying that these prohibitions in Section A were required under U.S. code, specifically motor carriers, bus drivers, things of that nature. And my pushback was that it was in conflict with state law. And again, I completely hear Ms. Hill's points and agree with them. It's just simply for me that if possession of a topical cream that does not have any interference with someone's performance on the job or an interference with any action during the school day could somehow lead to disciplinary action, termination for violation of policy. That's what I'm concerned about. And otherwise, completely legal substance under North Carolina law that's being utilized, per this policy, somehow being used against an employee. And again, it might be that it's a situation that may not come up, right? Because if it's not creating a problem, then maybe it wouldn't be cited in an action. I just know that we have this other state law prohibiting it, that's why. That's all.
Thank you. Ms. Popiel.
Just to ask about that, because we weren't here for that. What would go against NC law? I'm trying to understand more about what you're talking about.
Yeah, so for example, like there are muscle relaxants, there are treatments that might use a small amount of CBD, for example, for medicinal use. That either it's a concentration that is not in violation of North Carolina law, and it could even be something that could be recommended by a physical therapist, by a specialist to relieve inflammation or pain. It's not any of these things that would constitute a controlled substance because those would be illegal, right? It's just whether a product has an ingredient that could trigger a test and could lead to an employee being terminated because they failed a test that detected the presence of a substance, even if that substance was actually legal in North Carolina in the concentrations with which the employee was using it.
And I would add, generally, if something is happening that's triggering a test, as it lays out here, we would have to have reasonable suspicion that there is some sort of use, something that is showing, impacting, looking at those particular factors before we would do anything like that, other than some of the suspicion list tests that happens as a part of our bus driver and CDL, people with those commercial driver license. So in general, if someone is using CBD oil outside of the bus driver context, and there's not anything from the use of that product that impacts the workplace or where it appears to be that person is under the influence of something or those sorts of things, we would know the vast majority of those times. generally, if we get called in to review anything in these areas, it's because there has been some demonstration of someone being under the influence of something outside, again, of the suspicionless testing under the bus driver requirements.
So if somebody were to take a test for us and something came back, do they have the opportunity to provide the source of what it is? Like here's a doctor thing, this is what I use, and that's
Yes.
considered?
Yes.
For me, it's just the language, regardless of whether or not it constitutes a controlled substance under state or federal law, that's problematic. Because I think if you didn't have that there, I think it would be clear that this is only applying to those substances whose use would be prohibited, because that's defined right there in statute. So,
And again, I see where you're saying, the second sentence there.
yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Ramey, do you think you can, before our board meeting?
Yeah,
Catch-
yes, I'll get up with Jonathan and look into that, yeah. I just don't know the answer.
Re-brought in?
Like an unless
And
situation?
if it's something to Chair Mahaffey, if they look at it and it's something that they advise does not need a change, we don't need to even bring that to the board table, but I would like to see it addressed.
I think we can get that done. Yeah?
Thank you.
Okay, great. With that, is there a motion to send this to action?
Before you
Before we
take
do
a
this?
motion, can I just get clarification on a couple, there were a couple of suggested revisions, but they were just individual board member suggestions. I don't know if we have marching orders to add anything. Do
So
you all
my
have some of that?
understanding was that you all wanted us to add a reference to the tobacco policy, as well as add in the duty to report, add that they could report directly to employee relations in case the supervisor is the person. So add that so that employees know they can.
And just want to
report
flag,
directly.
if we add that second, the first, I get would just be like one sentence at the end for rules about tobacco and vaping products, C policy, that's easy enough. On the second point, though, I just wanted to flag that I think that would be an expansion of what the policy is currently doing. It's now, currently that section's about self-reporting, right? It's about employees reporting their own,
No,
were we talking about something else?
this is the first paragraph under section E.
The second
First
paragraph
paragraph.
The second
is
paragraph is
self-report.
self-reported.
The first paragraph is,
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought we were talking about the next paragraph. Okay, so what is the suggestion again then?
Just at the very end there, where it says, shall report the facts and circumstances to a supervisor or principal, just to add that they could also report directly to employee relations.
I see. So would we say and to employee relations?
Sure.
Would that address that? Just add
rather
and?
than and, so it's or to?
Sounds like-
It says shall report to a supervisor or principal, and my question is, do you want to say and, make it required that the report also goes to employee
I
relations?
think we could just say or
Or is it an
employee
or?
relations.
Okay.
So that it will finish with to a supervisor, comma, principal, comma,
Yeah.
or employee relations.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
And there's consensus to make that change as well as to add the cross-reference to the tobacco policy. Looking for some nods there.
7250/5026
Yeah.
of the
Yep.
Anything else? Brady, make a motion to send this to first reading. Motion by Ms. Caulfield, second by Mr. Hershey. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? All right. Passes, and we move on to 7241, drug and alcohol testing of commercial motor vehicle operators.
Okay, so 7241 is an existing policy. It is one where we have incorporated some changes that the School Boards Association recommended with regard to some of the clearinghouse requirements. So you'll see that the changes here are written in red to show where they are NCSBA modifications to our existing policy. And the changes basically just make it clear where we're, that because the clearinghouse has become sort of it is now in place for people to use, there are some things that are no longer required in terms of the information that we receive regarding an applicant who may be driving a commercial vehicle. One of the things I will note for you is that the NCSBA did include a recommendation that would add information about return to work, return to duty requirements if someone was found to be in violation, but those were provisions that were originally not a part of our policy, and when this policy was originally adopted, they were excluded because we do not generally return people to work if they have been found to be in violation of the drug and alcohol testing requirements as a commercial vehicle driver. So we did continue to exclude those pieces from the policy. But the rest of it is, again, just to comply with some of the changes regarding the clearinghouse and not having to gather as much information from prior employers because it is now the standard reporting process.
Questions? That one seems pretty straightforward.
Only if you look in section C, it's not a change, but that is the language sort of related to this broader issue I talked about in the previous policy and some of the wordsmithing that was done there. So, thank you.
Yes, and section C is specific to Wake County. That is language that we have put into the policy.
Other questions or comments?
Motion to move to first reading.
We have a motion to go to first reading from Mr. Hershey,
Second.
and a second from Dr. Eng. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Moving on to workday and overtime, 7,500.
So policy 7500 would be a new policy. Once adopted, this would replace multiple policies that we have from the old manual, including policy 3221, which is teacher workday, policy 4205, working hours for assistants, policy 4100/7910, Fair Labor Standards Act compliance. It would also replace portions of policy 2280/380/4800, which is our major leave policy or supplement to the state board policy manual. So it would replace section 9.1 of that policy. And also in policy 2000, which is administrator hiring, it would replace section O. The policy is a combination of the standards that the School Boards Association had, and then incorporates some of our more specific changes that we brought in from our existing policies. And so it makes it clear, for example, with licensed and professional employees, professional school-based employees, that the workday begins at a half hour before and extends until the responsibilities for the students, and the students have departed for whom they are responsible. And it makes it clear the 7.5 hours as the minimum workday for those staff members. Also, we kept in the School Boards Association language about some of the other things that are included as a part of workday, like parent conferences, meetings, extracurricular activities where applicable. We also include a section dealing with instructional assistants to just make it clear what that workday is for an instructional assistant. Again, with the language of the workday beginning at least 30 minutes prior to the start of the instructional day. And then for other employees, we included from the administrator policy that there is a minimum of 5-day, 40-hour work week for administrators, and then other work schedules would be set by the superintendent or designee. In section B, we just reflected our current work week, which is Monday at 12 a.m. until Sunday at 11:59 p.m., so changed from what they had in their sample policy language. In section C on overtime and compensatory time, we added some of the information about how our employees use overtime and some of the approval process. For example, here we have that the employee would have approval from their applicable budget manager or designee, such as the immediate supervisor, who would be able to approve any overtime that an employee would work. Then we provided details about the compensatory leave process, when an employee would earn that. Our current policy provides that an employee would earn compensatory leave in lieu of overtime pay, and that they also would use compensatory leave first with regard to using their leave or taking any sort of leave. So this lays out those requirements with regard to the earning of compensatory leave, as well as using compensatory leave for our employees. And if someone leaves the school system or transfers to a position that's not a position where they can earn overtime pay, then this makes it clear that we would convert that and pay the employee out for that compensatory leave time. The policy includes Section D, which talks about making sure that timesheets are accurate. We just moved, the green, if you see green, is where we cut something from one place in the policy and put it in another place in the policy. So we moved information here about completing timesheets accurately and making it clear that failure to complete timesheets accurately or falsifying timesheets could lead to disciplinary action. And then we do a Section E that references our attendance expectations and our policy dealing with employee absences.
Questions, comments?
I do have a question. I don't know if it falls under this policy or if it's something else, but it was brought before me, questions about Guardian and Lytton. I thought I was missing something. I'm like, right. And they were asking about the pay. I don't know if that falls in this policy, because there was quite a few questions about it. and-
Whether that would be leave that would be compensated if they were
Right.
fulfilling guardian ad litem duties.
Because when they have to serve their duties, then they can't actually be in the classroom, but in order to help with that program, they're actually, have to do it during court hours, but they were told that they have to use their personal time for that.
So
Yeah, that's one we are reviewing. We think there's going to be some coverage under the community responsibility or that civic responsibility leave, which we will have a policy coming forward specific to that.
Okay.
Still trying to get you an answer, at least in the meantime, of can we use that policy in
Right.
order to cover court attendance for guardian ad litem. So I'm hoping to have that answer.
Okay.
worked
I
through
was just
soon.
mentioning,
Yeah.
because as we're talking about all this different type of pay, I didn't know if it would fit in here.
Yeah.
But, okay, so that's going to be something separate.
It'll be separate,
All right.
you'll see when we present policy 7510, we have a list of what we anticipate being the leave policies. And as AJ mentioned, this one may, that would potentially fall under our civil responsibility policy. That's what we're researching to see if that would be covered, and if so, under what circumstances.
Okay.
But
And thank
you'll
you
see that
for
list
following up on that.
in that policy.
Okay, thank you.
Why the use of the word, just, it says in the second sentence, employees shall strictly follow the working hours set? I'm just curious as why you emphasize strictly versus just saying employees shall follow the working hours set.
I believe it's from our existing policy, but I'd need to double check. In just one moment. We often pull some of that language over. There is no particular reason to have it like that, and we certainly are willing to take that out if there's any concern about that language.
I would assume the only, I agree, it's not necessary to follow the rules, means follow the rules strictly. I mean, unless there's some wiggle room given in the rule. But I would assume that's meant to address, chronic slate lateness, somebody who shows up 3 minutes late for every single meeting and, so thinks it's close enough. I would assume that's kind of, in practice, why it might be helpful to have a word like that.
We are It's
strongly about
Yes.
strictly?
It's just an odd use of the word there to me, but I don't, it's not a use, it's not like a deal. I just was not unsure why we would bother.
Yeah.
I feel strongly about keeping it in.
Yeah, we're fine if that's something that you would
Oh, that's the
propose
board for
for-
this to decide, not for me.
If you all would like us to remove that, we can, just let us know.
I'm okay with removing it. It still has the same power, right?
Let's say.
It's still, you're still saying it,
This-
just strictly,
yeah.
it's just.
The expectation is still clear that you're following the rule, the working hours set by the principal or supervisor. Don't be
I'm
late.
fine with that, and there might be an issue where you have to work with your supervisor, so, because something's happening and.
Yeah.
The language just allows for flexibility.
Removing the word strictly.
While still also not allowing for flexibility because it's followed.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe
I'm
that's
fine
the
with either
both
way.
and
It's not, it's just a.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I mean,
I don't have a. I don't have a
Like you said, the
strong-
flexibility,
You can
the
cut.
flexibility, you may want the flexibility to be the discretion in applying the policy. If somebody is a couple minutes late and it's not a big deal and they're not usually late, then I imagine any principal is going to let that go. But if it is a chronic issue, then it might be helpful to say, the policy says strictly means strictly, you can't be 2 minutes late every single day. We've talked about this before.
But Chris was late. That one time.
That one time.
I saw,
Sorry, I have 3 kids arguing in my head at all times.
I saw an indication from Mr. Hersey that he.
I don't,
would like to
it
remove
doesn't matter, like, we don't need to spend any more time on it. I would cut it if it was just up to me, because I think it's totally unnecessary, but that's just me.
Are there thumbs up for strong feelings of striking strictly?
That's fine.
I mean, I have no objection to
Well,
it,
there.
so.
All right,
Looks like-
we will remove strictly. But they still shall follow.
Right.
So,
Everyone remembers that day on February 27th when everything fell into ruin because
yeah. Any other questions, comments?
I do, but I'll save it for the section on the policy on leave. That's
Okay.
coming up.
All right.
Motion to move the first reading.
All right, we have a motion from Mr. Hershey to move it for our first reading.
Second. Oh,
And a second from Mr. Haggerty or Ms. Caulfield, and strictly. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? All right, the ayes have it. We'll move on to employee absences.
So policy 7501, employee absences, is actually just a renumbering of this policy to move it from our old policy manual into the new manual. We are not recommending any modifications or changes to the policy. And if you'll see at the bottom that we put in the revision dates from the other policy in its original form. Once adopted, this would have replaced policy 2281/3801/4801. And the policy just lays out our standards that we use with regard to excessive absences and unauthorized absences for employees. But again, no recommended changes from our existing policy.
Questions, comments?
Comment to note that we do have habitual tardiness here, so any concerns about strictly following work rules are solved by this policy.
Thank you, Mr. Ramey. This is why we pay you the big bucks.
That's right.
All right. Is there a motion to send this to action?
So moved.
Second.
All right, motion from Mr. Hershey, second from Dr. Ing. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? On to compliance, 7505.
7505 is kind of the beginning of some of the leave policies and operates with our current policy manual where we basically say the DPI benefits manual is the manual that lays out the requirements with regard to leave and other benefits for employees. that we will comply with that policy manual. Anything that we're doing is essentially supplementing that manual, and that if there are any conflicts, that we would modify things as necessary to make sure that we're conforming with that policy manual. So it is language that's in our current policy, 2280/3800/4800. But this is a NCSBA recommended policy.
This is so that we have compliance with other policies.
Yes.
Policies about policies.
Oh, yes. The state board, I don't know how much you guys have dealt with this, the DPI Benefits and Employment Manual, but we look at our policies and we look at that manual to see what we have to do. So, but yes, this would do that. And I should mention, and I apologize for this, Policy 7501 was a unique Wake County policy that we added in. This is a School Boards Association policy.
Thank you, Ms. Hall. Are there comments or questions on this one?
Motion to move to first reading.
Second.
All right, we have a motion from Mr. Hershey, a second from Mr. Hagerty. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? All right. 7501, leave.
That's 7510.
75, yeah, that would be the one. 7510, thank you.
Yes. So policy 7510 is a new policy from the School Boards Association policy manual. It is the sort of summary leave policy in their manual. We did something and spent some time discussing this policy, and you will see in here one of our recommendations is to create separate policies for some of our policy provisions rather than just one policy that has one or two sentences. We believe as a staff that this helps our employees to more quickly and easily access those policies that they may be looking for. So I'll walk you just through some of the information and changes, and also note one thing that I would like that we need to make a modification for. So in the last paragraph before number A, or letter A, this basically incorporates some of our prior provisions, but makes it clear that employees are supposed to follow absence reporting and leave request procedures as we've laid out in this policy. It says here, as outlined in section E, but that should be section C, if you all would permit us to make that change for moving forward. And then section A in this policy lays out our current processes related to leave requests and when employees do not follow leave processes. Section B talks about minimal leave time. The School Boards Association policy talked about leave in increments of hours, but we provide leave in increments of 1/2 and full day. So that's the information that we've had here in section B. And then section C is the section where we have laid out what we would anticipate to be the policies moving forward. And this is where we are recommending that we do individual policies for our different leave types rather than the joint policy. So what you see highlighted in yellow would be the policies that we would be adding as we move forward. What's not highlighted are policies that are already in the School Boards Association manual. And as set up, the School Boards Policy 7510, and you'll see the rest of this is mostly strike-through of their original policy. But as set up, they have 7510 as their original policy, and then they have some specific policies that they laid out separately, such as Family Medical Leave Act, military leave, and voluntary shared leave. And again, as a staff, we believe that for employees to be able to quickly find what they need to find in the manual and look at the policies that they are trying to follow, we would recommend doing those as individual policies in the highlighted yellow policies that we have listed here. And then the only other section here is just indicating that anything that's not specifically laid out here in the manual would be addressed as a part of the DPI benefits manual.
Thank you. Mr. Haggerty, you said you had something lined up for leave.
Yeah, so I'm trying to see how comp time will work now. And so I'm flipping back between the two policies. In the old policy, or I think it says that you have to use that comp time earned within a reasonable amount of time. And then here, we had a restriction that said you had to use it within one pay period, but we've struck that.
We did.
So we're just creating more flexibility there for when we might be able to apply it.
Yes, so that, because not all employees will necessarily be taking leave within the next pay
Right.
period. So we thought it gave a little more flexibility for those employees to be able to use it, while still saying that you would use that leave before you use any other type of leave that you might have available.
Okay, I support that. I just want a clarification.
Yep. Any other questions, comments? Ms. Caulfield?
So the yellow are to be,
Yes.
they're pending, all of the yellow ones that you have there, they will become policies.
So in fact, all of these under 7,500 will be coming to you.
Okay.
But the yellow ones are the ones that we are creating as new Wake County policies.
Okay.
Pulling out, for example, if you go to the next page, you'll see there's a strikeout for sick leave, there's a strikeout for paid parental leave, personal leave, vacation leave. And because of the way our current policy adds in more information to provide to employees with regard to those different types of leave, we didn't want to put that here, making this a 20 or more page policy once we added in all of that. So we really felt like it would be more helpful to employees to have it as a standalone policy. So everything under 7,500 on this list will be coming to you.
And they do exist now as policies in the old manual, Ms. Coffey, but we would be bringing them over.
Right,
Yes.
updating them and.
So in the old manual, they are our supplement policy. I go to 3,800, but it is a, keep on scrolling supplement to the state board manual where we lay out the specific provision that we're adding additional local policy to.
Okay, thank you.
I appreciate the fact that those are laid out separately and with more clarity for our employees, especially when you're looking for leave. It's usually during a time of stress.
And you're normally looking for one, right?
Yes.
If you're looking for sick leave, you're normally just looking for sick leave.
Motion to move in first reading.
Second.
We have a motion from Mr. Hershey, a second from Ms. Caulfield. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. All right, with that, we've reached the end of our policy agenda. So well done. Thank you all. And our next meeting will be March 12th, and we are adjourned. Thank you.